Hey everyone, Kendrick and Josh here. If you're listening to this, you're hearing an old episode we uploaded to the feed that was recorded prior to joining forces with the last of the Action Heroes podcast network. You can listen to these old episodes and hear how the Star Trek connection and our Willis ranking system came to be. You can find out how Josh's oven works, hear us make mistakes, and get corrected repeatedly.
If you're loving this, we'd love for you to also check out other podcasts on the network, since they're all great. If you're interested in finding out more about this particular podcast, head on to williswaypod.com for more info, or email us at williswaypod@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and enjoy.
1, 2, 3, hit it, boys!
So get together, have a few laughs.
Uh-oh, shit, lady, do I sound like I'm ordering a pizza?
Hey, put the freaking gun down on the ground right now. Take your shot across the freaking street and say that until we come and get you.
Hello and welcome to Where There's a Willis, There's a Way, a film podcast about the multitude of works by Bruce Willis. My name is Kendrick Martin, and with me as always is...
Josh Carter.
And here we're on episode 2. Josh, do you know what movie we're going to talk about?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the movie Sunset from 1988.
I'm glad you know, because it would have been awkward if you didn't know.
Yeah.
I want to remind everyone, as always, if you have questions or comments, you can contact us by emailing williswaypod@gmail.com or on Twitter @williswaypod.
That's right, Kendrick.
So as Josh mentioned, we're going to be talking about the 1988 film Sunset. We're going to be going over the description of the movie. We're going to be talking about our thoughts over the movie, dive into Bruce Willis's portrayal in the movie, and then wrap it up with your favorite, The Wheel of Willis.
Sounds great.
So Sunset, 1988, I'm going to read the IMDb description here. Whilst making a silent film about the life of the legendary lawman Wyatt Earp, veteran actor Tom Mix, played by Bruce Willis, discovers the real Earp, played by James Garner, is on the film set as a technical advisor. The two become friends, but when a murder takes place, the two become partners and set about tracking down the killer. Now, just like last week, we're going to be spoiling the plot of this movie as we go throughout our discussion. If that's important to you, if you want to remain unspoiled, I would say pause it here. Go rent Sunset on your streaming or video on demand service of choice, and then come back and unpause us because we'll be waiting.
Yep, absolutely.
So Josh, before we get started,
Yeah,
I was going to ask, have you seen Sunset before, or was this the first time?
I hadn't seen Sunset before. This is my first time watching it, first time hearing about it for the purposes of this podcast. So I had no idea. I had no background knowledge before this movie, and I went in actually pretty blind again. Same thing as last week.
Nice. I had watched it once before, just a couple years ago, when I was doing some Bruce Willis, when I was looking up Bruce Willis, kind of before this podcast became a thing. So This was the second time I've seen Sunset.
Yeah. So I guess a question for you then is, did you tend to like it the second time around more than the first time, or did you like it more the first time?
I think I liked it more the first time, and we'll be going into some of the reasons why I liked it less the second time.
Yeah.
But I think the first, not knowing what the movie's about, I think really played to this movie's advantage because it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
And the first time you watch this, you're so raptured by everything that's going on that you can't help but enjoy it. And the second time I was thinking, well, I know how this works and this scene is unnecessary or kind of drags a little bit. One thing I forgot to mention when we introduced this movie, it's also by director Blake Edwards, who directed Blind Date, the movie we discussed last episode.
Yeah, and it's like it's written by him as well. He didn't do the original story. The original story was done by I just looked them up earlier. They did some sort of horrible movie, and I cannot remember what it is off the top of my head. But Blake Edwards did do the screenplay as well for it. So it was Yeah, it's kind of interesting watching a movie that has like a complete like viewpoint all the way through it, because you always expect those to be a little bit more consistent. Like I think of like Rian Johnson or like Edgar Wright are like two writer directors that I definitely appreciate a lot, but I don't know. It didn't feel like as cohesive as I was expecting it to be necessarily.
I agree, and in doing research for this episode, I looked up, like I am wont to do, film reviews, and Roger Ebert's film review is kind of the main one from this era, and he talks about the struggle of the studio kind of wanting to sell it as a comedy, and if you watch the trailer or look at the marketing material, it's played for laughs, but the actual movie itself does not have a whole lot of comedy in it. Yeah,
that was something that I kind of noticed. It definitely felt like a pretty modern movie in that way, and like the aspect of it's mostly a drama, but there are some jokes in it. It's just not like it's not a comedy straight up or anything like that. And I feel like if this movie was released today, it might actually play a little bit better than it did back then in some ways, just because some of it felt some of the stuff that aged well with this movie aged really, really, really well. And then the like problems, I don't know if how those would be perceived in today's day and age, but it didn't necessarily feel like a more dramatic time period piece of that era from what I've seen. But that was just kind of my little takeaways from watching it. That's kind of how I felt as I was going through it. The movie that the other writer did, by the way, was the Garbage Pail Kids movie, which is one of the worst movies of all time, apparently.
Wow, so, literally a garbage movie.
Yeah, a garbage movie with garbage in the title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that was what they're going for. So this movie is essentially kind of taking place during Hollywood's transition from silent movies to talkies.
Yeah.
And one of the things I didn't catch on my first watch that I noticed on the second is they talk about Charlie Chaplin and the rest of the studio industry kind of struggling with the move from silent action films or regular silent movies into talkies or films with dialogue. Do you have much experience watching old silent films? I know for me, I don't really.
Yeah. I've seen a few. Like I've seen Buster Keaton's 1 Week, like most of that all the way through. And then I was watching some clips of I know that we're jumping ahead a little bit, but some clips of IRL Tom Mix as well. So I have like a little bit of experience with them. The nice thing is that they're like basically all the ones that are preserved are on YouTube. So they're pretty easy to find. It's just like, it's such a different like era of movie making. It's kind of, some of them are kind of hard to watch if I'm going to be honest, but that might just be like my ADHD brain that doesn't want to take the time and patience for it. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying with like how awkward it was transitioning to talkies. Definitely a lot of studios had problems with that. Like I was just watching one of the Tom Mix talkies today, and it was weird because like in the silent era, they couldn't have sound of the actors on set, so they put music over it. And then as soon as they could have the sound of the actors on set, it seemed like they didn't really do scores that much. So at least back in the beginning, from what I could gather from watching this. So it just felt like there was a lot of dialogue that's just spoken over nothing. And especially now that feels so slow because a lot of things just have like background beats going and stuff. So it was kind of odd watching the like early 30s movies and how awkward they are compared to like even the stuff in the 40s.
Yeah. And music plays such a big role in silent films, obviously, because that's the only sound that they have. And oftentimes they would be shown in a studio or in a cinema where someone would be playing like live piano as they projected this movie on the screen. So it's kind of wild that the added of dialogue kind of slowed the sound migration.
Yeah, it was very interesting because it's like I feel like you could, if you took the time to colorize a lot of the old talkies, you could be pretty surprised by the quality that you could draw out of a lot of them, just because a lot of them are filmed on, well, they're all filmed on film. So as long as the reels are preserved, you can get basically 4K out of them. So I'd be very, very interested to see some restoration stuff that goes towards colorization and like the accessibility of those old movies. But I don't think there's a big demand for them, but it would just be interesting to see like what those would look like in a modern day era, like with modern day technology going back over it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was just going to say, kind of continuing on that thought, is the idea of Westerns. And so this movie, Bruce Willis plays a famous actor in Westerns, and I'm curious, and I couldn't find a lot of evidence that supported or denied this, but I was curious if maybe when Sunset came out in 1988, if people were excited for essentially kind of a new Western, because Westerns, to me, I guess when I think of Western, I think of The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, or similar movies that kind of came out in the 60s, early 70s. And so that would have been roughly 20 plus years before this. And so I was curious if this was like maybe starting a revival of Westerns, but reading about the history of Westerns, cowboy Westerns specifically in American cinema, I didn't really see any evidence that kind of pointed to or away from this.
Yeah, like I know that Westerns definitely seem to die off basically about when John Wayne kind of stopped being in them. Like not exactly, but it was definitely like late 60s from what I've seen. But every once in a while it feels like there's like a pretty big Western movie that comes out and then they go away for like a long time again. They kind of had like you know how like a lot of people are pretty tired of superhero movies at this point. And so like Marvel can't release like another Thor 2. They have to do stuff that's interesting in a different way. Like the demand for the Ant-Man movies as like a long-term watchable movie is pretty small, I feel, compared to like other more artistic films. Cause like the market's so inundated with them. It's like, I don't really have time. I don't really feel like I want to spend time necessarily watching another Ant-Man movie. I do love Paul Rudd, but they're not like, they're not the most like, interesting long term. Like maybe I'll watch it once and then that'll be it. But Westerns kind of had like this market saturation problem where there were just so many of them, and then they died off for a while, and then they kind of came back and then died off for a while. The same thing happened with like Guitar Hero type games and like musicals back in the 60s and 70s. So yeah, it's just part of like the genre tiredness that everybody has to experience. Like once you just get exhausted with it, you just there's not a whole lot of demand for them. And like back in the 80s, I know of one other kind of pretty big Western, which was Silverado. And then I want to say that one Western movie with Will Smith in it might have actually been 90s.
You're referring to the Wild Wild West?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, 1999. Yeah, that like was a big part about killing off basically anybody's want for more Western movies for a long while.
Yeah, people were like, ooh, Westerns. Oh, Westerns.
Yeah. Although Tombstone was really good, and that was in like the 93. So
Yeah.
I don't dislike Westerns by any means.
Yeah, I agree. I think every few years you get a really solid Western, and I think they've become kind of like superheroes are today. That was a good comparison, where we had a few years where every year there was 10 superhero movies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, indie movies were about superheroes, comedies were about superheroes. So I think just like today, we have a Western that comes out every once in a while, and it can be a small movie, or it can be something like The Hateful Eight by Quentin Tarantino. That was a massive movie.
Yeah. Not in terms of like set or anything like that. Just
no,
it feels like a big movie when you're watching it.
Yeah, it's very long.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very interesting. I kind of was actually hoping for more elements of a Western movie when I was watching it. I felt like every time they were there, I was really excited about it. And then there was like a lot of moments of not that. Like that one sequence where they're shooting the scene in the bar and there's like that fight going on. I was like, yes, give me more of this. And then there's a great bit, like maybe it's 80% of the way through the movie, that feels like the height of Tom Mix's character, except for maybe the end battle sequence, which we could talk about. But and every Western moment I was just eaten up and loving. And I definitely wanted more of them, I felt like.
Yeah, because when you start this movie, so the opening scene is them filming a Western, and you're not told they're filming a Western. It's just like a scene straight out of a classic Western. And Bruce Willis does the classic hero moves, and he's riding horses, and he's saving women and shooting gangsters and all the things you would see in a 1920s Western film.
Mm-hmm.
And even after he meets with the Malcolm McDowell character, and they kind of talk about his next project and all that stuff, and he gets on that horse and rides the wrong way. The line about the horse has the wrong end of Tom Mix or whatever.
Yeah.
That kind of makes you think like, oh, there's going to be some like fun Western horse scenes. And then there's another scene later where they're filming the Tombstone shootout.
Oh yeah, that was good too.
And Wyatt Earp's character is kind of having like a strange flashback moment of the actual shootout.
Oh yeah, it was weird that they brought that in like once and then they never used it again.
Yeah. What did you think of James Garner's portrayal as Wyatt Earp? Was he convincing Wyatt Earp?
Yeah, I think that James Garner was like hands down the best part about this movie. Well, maybe the second best part of it, with costumes being the best. But he was really, really great in this. I've watched like The Great Escape, which he's in as a youth, and I have not watched it in many, many years. And I didn't remember anything really about his performance at all. But I was watching some other clips of him today, and I was like, this guy was really, really good. His performance works for me the entire way through the movie. He is pulling no punches and just being super professional about everything, I felt like.
Completely agree. I think he is just a wonderful role and character actor. I found it interesting that he actually has more screen time than Bruce Willis's character, but gets second billing.
Yeah, that is criminal.
Which is kind of a fascinating thing. Did you know that this was the second movie he played Wyatt Earp in?
Yes, I did know that. I looked that up just today, and I, of course, had to go watch some shots of that other movie where he plays Wyatt Earp, which is escaping me at the moment.
Hour of the Gun, which I have not seen any of.
Hour of the Gun, yeah. So I watched a couple of clips from it, and he is like 20 years younger, and he's also doing a great job playing Wyatt Earp. He's a little bit more, I'd say, like softer in that movie than he comes off in this one. Not that he comes off like super hard around the edges at all, but he is even a little bit more like reluctant reluctant gunman sort of character in the last one, reluctant sharpshooter. So yeah, I liked him a lot. I think he was great. He does give off like grandpa vibes though, to me at least.
Yeah. I thought his portrayal of Wyatt Earp was really wonderful, and I loved how he remains like what you would expect a lawman to be, even when he's talking to other police officers or out fighting bad guys. He's like trying to maintain justice and not just shoot from the hip.
Yeah.
It speaks to my thoughts around how this movie feels like it's trying to be so many different things because of that scene is an example of in Tombstone where he's kind of having these flashbacks and appears traumatized by his role in that shootout. And a lot of people died and friends of his have died, and what you would expect to be a very traumatic experience. And so, but like you said, it's never brought up again. Like, yeah, he's like, oh, this is perfect and looks good to me. And then they go off and like continue on the hijinks of the movie.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of things in this movie that needed to be edited on like one or two more passes on the script. Because this movie has a lot of excess in it. I feel like just from watching it, like there are so many characters that you're trying to like keep track of throughout the movie, and like the audio mixing is weird. So those two things don't help each other at all when trying to hear what all's going on. And then there also, I feel, needs to be a little bit more aggressive editing in the editing room, just because there are some like really odd moments that go on like a little bit long and stuff like that. Some of the things I feel like just needed to be tightened up a little bit. Once again, like I'm not a huge fan of slapstick, so it was really odd right after the like murder of what's her face takes place, when like it kind of starts kicking the story into high gear. Right after that happens, or I should say right after it kicks the story into gear, because the movie does not feel like it has a purpose before she dies. And then she dies, and then you're like, okay, now I know what's going on. But once that happens, and there's like a car that like runs into a fence, and like people like running around like it's a silent film. I get that it was like kind of an homage to that, but it just felt so out of place with what had just happened. And I was like, yeah, if I was an editor, I would totally cut that just immediately.
Yeah. Let's talk for a minute about Malcolm McDowell. Now, while he's not the like ultimate bad guy here, he is the ultimate bad guy. I mean, that character that he plays is like one stone cold motherfucker. Yeah. And he flips a switch where he is, I mean, they even talk about it, I think, in one of the scenes where his character is nice and friendly, and then his sister comes in and she's like, I need some help. And he's like, well, I'm going to punch you now. And I was like, what on earth? Yeah.
I feel like he's doing better work than the material that he was given. Like it kind of feels like watching a Liam Neeson in The Phantom Menace, where he's just like making it look like Shakespeare. It's a little bit doo-doo sometimes, but he's doing a great job. So yeah, I totally bought his performance. I thought that he was just really, really good in it. And it's great that you mention him, because he brings up our great segment of every episode that we're going to talk about, the Star Trek connection. So
the Star Trek connection.
So Malcolm McDowell, I don't know if you know this, but he has a relation to Star Trek.
Go on.
He is the uncle of Alexander Siddig, the guy that plays Dr. Bashir on Deep Space Nine. And he was also in a Star Trek movie. So, yeah.
I did know about the movie relation. You're speaking of Insurrection. I believe he plays the bad guy.
Not Insurrection, Generations.
Oh, that's right, Generations.
The one with Kirk and Picard.
Yeah. Yeah, probably my least two watched Star Trek movies, Insurrection and Generations.
God, I hate like almost every single next gen movie. They suck so much.
There's some bangers in there, but yeah, for the most part, they're pretty bad.
Yeah.
Man, I have not looked ahead, but I really hope we can keep up the Star Trek connection with every Bruce Willis movie.
Well, if we can't connect the next movie to Star Trek, I know how to connect it to a Star Trek parody. So,
oh well, yeah,
we'll make it work.
We can make it work, I suppose. With that, so Malcolm McDowell's character in Sunset is a former clown in silent film movies who became a movie studio owner.
Yeah,
and the end, which takes place at the very first Academy Awards.
Yep.
Where he plays this clown character and just rolls around the stage. I was flabbergasted because it was so ridiculous.
And they did not talk about it before. They weren't like, oh, you Mr. Clown, did you just tumble down those stairs or anything? They didn't say a fucking thing about it, and then all of a sudden he's like jumping around.
They do bring it up once.
Oh, they do. Okay.
In the most ridiculous way. I believe it's when he catches Wyatt Earp in his house, and he like walks into his house, and then he pretends to trip and does like a little tumbling act and kind of rolls through their room and like pops back up, and he's like, haha. Again, just like, what on earth?
I think that I might have just somehow blocked that out of my mind. I do not even remember that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me and my roommate who were both watching it were like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
Because that's like not how you pay off a satisfying buildup of a character trait throughout a movie.
No. And that's kind of leads me to a point I wanted to ask you about. So Blake Edwards directed this, and he directed Blind Date. And we talked about in the last episode around Blake Edwards came from directing a lot of movies with a lot of slapstick comedy, i.e. the Pink Panther and so on and so forth. And Blind Date has a lot of slapstick comedy. So he has a resume full of slapstick. And this movie, other than the aforementioned ridiculous clowning, doesn't have a lot of that slapstick, but instead has much more combat. Now, do you feel like Blake Edwards is trying to transition here, or do you think he just didn't want to do slapstick comedy for this movie?
I probably have to go look and see what else he directed after this, but I want to say that he kind of wanted to do something different. That's what it seems like to me, because it feels way different than Blind Date. Like, it almost doesn't even feel like the same director. Or actually, I will say it doesn't feel like the same director. It feels like he's really trying to flex a different muscle for this movie.
Right. I totally agree. What did you think about the combat overall? I know, so we mentioned Bruce Willis does some horse tricks in the beginning of the movie, and then he does some more at the end. Those are obviously stunt actors. Mm-hmm. But other than those, the fighting and the horse acting and other combat and stunt like elements, did you enjoy those?
Yeah, I did actually. I thought that they were pretty fun. I was kind of surprised, like, how straight so many things were played. Like that one sequence where they're like in the like kitchen of I can't remember what the bad guy's name is. Dutch, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. So like all three of the main characters basically are over there, and like there's that like police officer who's got a gun as well. That scene could definitely have been played a lot more slapsticky, but it was played 100% straight. And I was invested with all the characters and everything that was going on. But the sequence before that with Bruce Willis, where he's like fighting the like butler guy, it was like odd and it felt out of place to me. That sequence was played a little bit more for laughs. So I don't really know kind of what the overall goal was, because it feels like one moment he's going for more silly, the next moment he's going for more straight, and I don't know what his intention was with it.
Yeah, I agree. I felt like it was, again, kind of just all over the place.
Mm-hmm. I really, really, really like the shootout, though. Like, I thought that was a great moment for the characters, and it had like the right amount of tension in it. Yeah, I liked that sequence a lot. I thought it was really fun.
And I also enjoyed that whole scene in the Spanish restaurant.
Yes.
Where both Wyatt Earp and Tom Mix have to kind of defend these angry stunt actors who don't believe Tom Mix has what he portrays to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked that sequence as well. One other thing that I wanted to talk about as far as like a dropped thread goes in the movie is that, do you remember like in the beginning of the movie, they make a big deal about how Bruce Willis speaks Spanish, but he's like just doing like very basic Spanish words. He's just like, well, you're like my amigo, man. And then he's like, oh, you sound like you speak a lot of Spanish. He's like, mi casa es su casa. And you're like, I'm pretty sure like most everybody knows how to say these things, but whatever. And then they like never bring it up again, I feel like.
Maybe in the 1920s, not everyone knew those words. I don't know.
That is possible, I guess.
Interesting. I do have a couple other thoughts along those lines, but I'll save them for our Bruce Willis discussion.
Yeah. The other dropped thread that was like bizarre to me was they bring up how like they conceived of the bad guys conceived of this whole plot to frame Bruce Willis for a rape. So he'll go to prison, and they frame him for a rape. So he goes to prison. He goes to jail, has a scene in the jail, and then the next scene, he is out of the jail, and there is no explanation for it whatsoever. They just do not explain how he gets out at all. And so it's like, why would you even set up this whole thing except for to show that the bad guy is bad, but you don't even need the sister involved in the plot, like, at all, I feel. Like, you could do this movie, cut her out entirely, and it would be the exact same movie.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think this, like you were saying, the editing needed to be tightened up a little bit because it definitely started to feel a little long in the tooth.
Yeah.
Did you know what award the director got for this movie?
Yes, he got a Razzie for directing, right?
You are correct. It was news to me that the Razzies were even that old. I did not think the Razzies went back to the 80s.
Yeah. I want to say that was one of the first ones. Is that right?
I think it was the 7th. I think the first one might have been in... It was not that old. I don't think 81. They were a decade old when they... Yeah. Yeah, so probably the 8th or 9th. But yeah, it seemed like this movie was not critically acclaimed in its time.
Mm-mm.
On any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, that was something that was kind of odd to me. Like, I thought that it was better than... Well, I guess I don't want to spoil what I think of it, but I didn't think that this movie was that bad. And then like everywhere that I was looking, people were like, it's bad. I was like, I don't know. I've seen movies that are a lot worse than this movie and been fine with them. So I don't know. I didn't think that it was like amazing for sure, but the like Razzie for directing, I was like, I don't know. Maybe a Razzie for script writing, but a lot of the directing felt fine. I don't know.
Hey, man, don't let other people yuck your yums. If you want to enjoy it, you go right ahead.
Yeah. One thing that I will say about it is that the like time period, the period piece stuff of this movie was phenomenal. Like the at the beginning where it's all just like mood establishing and just kind of bringing you into the world, and we're doing a bunch of world building. I was like very down. I was so confused because it didn't have anything to do with the rest of the movie. For the most part, it was just like showing little snippets of life. But I like that immersive feeling where you're kind of picking up on the world as you go. I just wish that it was set a little bit tighter. Like, that could be a scripting thing, that could be partially a directing thing. Either way, it's Blake Edwards' fault. So, yeah.
Totally agree. I think this movie, and I think that's Blake Edwards. I thought the same thing about Blind Date, is his set dressing is phenomenal, and the details that go into the locations he creates, whether it's the cars in this movie or the different elements of 1920s LA.
Yeah.
I thought that was all really well done.
Yeah, for sure. That like Spanish bar sequence especially comes to mind as being particularly great. Yeah, there's definitely like a lot to like about this movie and a lot of elements that I really like, but as like a cohesive movie as a whole, there's just a lot of things that I'm not crazy about. So I think overall it's kind of like lukewarm, but there's parts of it that are really good. Like the costumes. The costumes are great in this movie. And the costume designer actually was nominated for an Oscar and later went on to do the costumes for 12 Years a Slave.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I agree. The costumes were fantastic, especially the costumes Bruce Willis wears. He has some of the most ridiculous and amazing outfits every time they're out and about on town, and I love them all.
Yes. Yeah, and like the costumes for just like a character perspective are really great. Like everybody's got like their own types of colors and stuff. So in a movie that's very garbled and confusing, having the costumes act as this visual representation to be able to clue us into what the hell is going on was super, super helpful. Like, Bruce Willis, like almost always being in white, for instance, is, pretty fun. And James Garner was like most of the time in like blacks and browns and stuff like that. So I liked the costumes in both like just literally what they were wearing and in the aspect of approaching it from like a character-based perspective.
Totally agree. And I want to know if I can get that rose embroidered leather shirt he's wearing.
Oh my God. Yeah. Let's see if that thing is for sale.
I found a shirt with a still from the movie on there.
Ooh.
That's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I don't know that it would have been popular enough to warrant any mass production of it. Yeah, it was great though. So many of the costumes in this movie are great.
Oh, I also liked the music.
The music worked for me. It did its job.
Yeah, I wasn't blown away by the music, but I thought it set the scene really well, and I liked the Western music. They kind of overlaid the Western scenes a lot.
For sure.
What did you think of the plane scene?
I didn't really find it all that necessary. Like, it felt like there was a few minutes of that movie where it was like, what if we were just planes, trains, and automobiles? And they do that for a second, but it's like horses, cars, and planes. So
yeah,
that's weird.
They get on a plane, they fly for a little bit, then they run out of gas.
Yeah.
And they land. They come so close to hitting those cows.
Yeah,
I'm like, this can't be the way it was supposed to happen, because you can't just get cows to do what you want. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I have no idea what all is happening. Cows are actually pretty receptive to people if you're nice to them, so they might have been able to get the cows to land over there or stand over there and then land the plane right near them. But yeah, it was very, very odd.
Yeah.
Although one of the farmers is the like brother of James Garner, so I think that's why he was in there. I remember looking that up.
It kind of gave us a reason for them to have to be on horseback together.
Yeah.
It was just a very contrived reason for that.
Yeah. I guess like Like, why didn't they just have them drive their car and then their car runs out of gas in front of a farm? I don't get why the plane was in there at all. Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to talk about was we already talked about the critical reception for this movie, but have you looked at like the movie as far as how it did box office wise?
I looked up the box office numbers for opening weekend, but I didn't look at the total box office numbers. Tell me.
So box office numbers for opening weekend are basically it. It made basically 4.6 million in total, and its budget was 19 million. So
Whoa.
It lost like basically, what is that? 5 times the amount of money that it made.
Wow, that's not good.
Yeah, it was like very, very badly received. And that was kind of like the weird thing for me, is that I don't feel like it necessarily deserved that. Like, I feel like this movie should have made a little bit of money, not done amazing, but it's definitely not the worst movie I've ever seen by like a long stretch. And the fact that it was like so maligned is so surprising to me. But I don't know if maybe there was like something really big that it was opening against, and so that's why it didn't do great, but I have no idea.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, now that we've talked about the movie overall, we're going to dive into our thoughts specifically around Bruce Willis, as this is a podcast about Bruce Willis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as we talked about last episode, when I think of Bruce Willis today, I think of the action star, grumpy, not at all comedic character that he plays in a lot of his later action movies.
Mm-hmm.
Blind Date and this movie both being a big surprise to me on how funny and gregarious he can be. Did you find him to be funny in this movie, or did you think that he played more of the classic action star that we know of today?
I'm gonna be real and say that I don't really think anything that he was doing was really working for me in this movie, but it's probably more in line with the comedic side of it, I would guess. I don't know. His performance was just odd, it felt like.
Yeah, it seemed to me like he was told to play a suave movie star, but I never once was that convinced he was a suave movie star. He was, in the beginning of the movie, he kisses like 4 different women that he comes across.
Yeah.
And then you find out later that like one of them is his partner. And so that makes sense that they, would have kissed. But the rest of the time, he's just like right and left. Women are fawning over him. And sometimes like he can turn on that charm and like wink and smile. I think of when he's at the train station welcoming Wyatt Earp on the horse. But the rest of the time, especially when he's kind of using his star power to get them into places, it just does not work for me.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. His voice in this movie sticks out like a sore thumb to me. Like, it is just straight up Bruce Willis doing Bruce Willis, not even like no like old transatlantic sort of talking aspect. And the real life Tom Mix did kind of have a voice that was like that when he was speaking, at least when he was like delivering lines and stuff like that. So I don't really know what all he's going for in this movie. It was odd. And I don't know if you saw the quote that James Garner is quoted as saying about him, but he was not kind to Bruce Willis's performance as well.
What did he say?
So he is quoted as saying, "Willis is high school. He's not that serious about his work. He thinks he's so clever that he can just walk through it, make up dialogue and stuff. I don't think you work that way."
Wow.
So to say that about a co-star is pretty rough, but like I don't feel like he was that bad, but I can definitely see why a actor of James Garner's caliber would be kind of like perturbed to be working with somebody that is not as good. And I don't really know, like, I guess Bruce Willis is trying in the movie, but I've seen him try harder. Maybe it's just he's gotten more skills since then, but I can see kind of where he's coming from, where James Garner's coming from with that quote. It is still pretty rough, though.
So this is Bruce Willis's second movie, obviously, and we don't know what his TV show Moonlighting consisted of because, as we mentioned last episode, it's not easy to find, so we haven't been able to watch it. But I wonder if acting with James Garner was kind of his first chance acting with someone with that big of a, list of work. Like James Garner had been in he'd been in TV
Very
shows. Very
prolific actor.
He had been in a lot of movies. He was obviously like very experienced in Hollywood. And then you have Bruce Willis, who comes in as kind of a comedian. And I kind of get the feeling that it sounds like he's making the claim that Bruce Willis was not taking his role seriously. And I could kind of see that to some extent, though I feel like he's just acting the script that was handed to him, and he's not making any attempt to kind of portray that role.
And the directing that's handed to him as well, because from what I've seen from this and Date Night, they both... It doesn't really feel like Bruce Willis or any of the other main actors were given like a lot of coaching, it feels like, as far as what type of performance they were kind of asked to give. That's what it feels like to me. Whenever I see something like that, it feels like the actor was kind of left on their own to come up with stuff like that. And so I could see how James Garner, who would be fine with that sort of scenario, might be frustrated by Bruce Willis, who he didn't think was up to snuff with that.
And so the whole role of Wyatt Earp coming into this set is to kind of teach Tom Mix or correct any missteps that Tom Mix has when he's playing Wyatt Earp in that movie. And I kind of thought that maybe we were going to see Bruce Willis's character of Tom Mix take on characteristics of Wyatt Earp outside of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning, there's that scene which I found extremely awkward where the sheriff or head of police or some kind of authority figure walks in and he asks the two guys, "Hey, were you at such and such a place last night?" And Bruce Willis goes, "I don't think so." And then Wyatt Earp was like, yes, we were. And that continues on for the whole conversation of Bruce Willis just kind of being like, "Oh, no, I'm not going to tell you anything." And Wyatt Earp being helpful, even though he also wasn't a fan of what was going on. And so I kind of thought, they're setting us up to see that Bruce Willis's portrayal of Tom Mix is going to grow and become more of the lawman that he plays in movies. Mm-hmm. But we never saw that really take place more of again. There's also that awkward scene right after the bar fight where Tom Mix says something like, "You're upstaging my threats. Don't do that again."
Yeah.
And I can't tell if that's played for laughs or if they're being serious.
Yeah, I was pretty confused by that as well. It feels like there's like a lot of ideas that are potentially good on paper. They just need to be fleshed out a little bit more. And that would definitely be on my list of things that was odd about it. Because you could have totally had like a Men in Black sort of scenario where it's like the old dog is teaching the new guy how to be more in line with it, and then the new guy gets to teach the old guy stuff as well. But it didn't really feel like either of the characters grew a whole lot throughout this movie. I'm actually going to say that it didn't feel like they grew at all. Because they just kind of learn stuff, and the audience learns stuff with them, and then they do stuff, and then the audience gets to watch them do stuff, and then the movie is over. And so from like a character perspective, definitely a lot of missed opportunities, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that may be what 1920s noir films were like.
Mm-hmm.
But especially by the 80s, and even more so now, we've kind of evolved a better way of storytelling that I don't think if you were to tell a story about that took place in the 1920s, you don't have to tell it in a way that like doesn't showcase the growth in storytelling techniques that we've made in the last 100 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was just odd. There's a lot of choices like that I was confused by, perplexed even. Like, he definitely wasn't like the worst part. Like, I don't want to mischaracterize him and say that he was terrible, but I just wasn't feeling it at all. And it's weird that he gets top billing and like he's not even arguably the main character. It was just odd. He feels a little bit miscast, I would say.
What did you think about the two love interests in this movie? Cheryl King is, I believe, Wyatt Earp's love interest, and then I don't recall the woman's name who plays Tom Mix's love interest, but I didn't think their characters are given a whole lot to do.
Yeah.
Other than kind of hang from their men's arms and seem helpless.
Yeah, the writing of basically every single woman in the piece felt a little lacking to me. So yeah. And it was really super, super weird. It felt like to have Wyatt Earp like sleep with what's her face, the like 26-year-old girl from the brothel. That was like felt so odd. And like, I know that I'm sure if you're a big famous lawman like that, maybe you sleep around a lot, but it felt so counterintuitive to like the gentleman character that we'd seen so far. So yeah, that felt really, really out of left field for me.
And not to mention the awkward moment of where he goes, "I could be your grandpa," and she's like, "I just need someone right now."
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That whole section was extremely strange.
And you could cut it out and not really have any problems either.
I agree.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like either of the two couples with our protagonists really had any chemistry.
Yeah, I would agree. And like, it was also like, I can't remember what the guy's name is, but the Harry Potter guy, he's just like a thing that comes up whenever the plot needs him to come up. He's like in it at the beginning and like, oh, he drinks a lot. And then he's like not in it for like 45 minutes. And then he comes back at the end and it's not satisfying at all, it feels like. So yeah, I wasn't as for that either.
Totally agree.
Right on. Yeah, so we're going to rank this against every other Bruce Willis film that we've seen for the podcast, which is so far 2. Which one would you rank higher, do you think?
So I think, to me, Blind Date takes the number 1 spot. And its main selling point as I compare these two is its length. Blind Date comes in like a cool 93 minutes or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that covers a lot of sins. This movie is longer. And I feel like if you can feel it.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely stuff that I like more about this movie than I liked about Blind Date. But I don't have necessarily a strong opinion on which one feels better to me necessarily. Maybe I might put this one maybe a little bit above Blind Date just because I like slapstick a little bit less, but they're definitely close, but for totally different reasons.
One thing I forgot to mention, and we don't have to leave this on the recording, is at some point we should sit down and write down our current favorite Bruce Willis movie and not tell the other person.
Oh yeah.
And then we'll ask each other, like, is this your favorite, or did it become your favorite?
That would be fun.
I haven't seen a lot of these movies, but I have a favorite in mind.
Yeah.
So just something to think about for the future.
I think that's a great idea. Cool. So,
you want to introduce the Wheel of Willis?
Yeah, we're moving on to like the last part of our podcast, the Wheel of Willis. So this is where we spin a wheel of questions about Bruce Willis in this movie, and we get to decide on an answer. So I just spun it, And the question was, if this Bruce Willis character was running for mayor, would you vote yes or no, and why? So, Tom Mix, played by Bruce Willis, running for Portland mayor, would you vote yes or no?
I'm gonna say no, because he has shown zero ability to lead.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem like a leader at all.
I would 100% agree with that. And I don't even know that character knows how to work a phone, so we'd be running into a lot of problems.
He doesn't know how to fly an airplane, but he sure gives it a shot, which makes me feel like he would definitely be a guy who would be like, I don't know how to be a mayor. I'm going to run.
Yeah. You're so right about that. Yeah, that would be interesting. I would be so interested to see what like an actual Bruce Willis mayoral candidacy would actually look like. Like what would his marketing campaign be?
Like actual Bruce Willis?
Yeah, actual real life, real to do Bruce Willis.
That would be funny. Did you know, small aside, Frances McDormand lives in Oregon?
No.
The actress.
I did not know that.
And apparently, I don't know where in Oregon, I just know it's a small town in Oregon. Apparently, she's like fairly involved in her local politics in that part of Oregon. I looked on YouTube and I tried to find, she speaks at a town hall, or she's on a radio commercial, or there's something, and I couldn't find it. But my parents ran into her at the airport one time here in Portland as she was getting ready to leave, and I led me down a rabbit hole of like, oh my gosh, she lives in like rural Oregon somewhere, or at least has a house, I guess.
Yeah, that's so cool. I always love hearing about people that live in Oregon. Oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you. I was driving around Portland, and I found out that there is a Willis Boulevard. So at some point, we have to go take a picture in front of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. So thank you, everybody, for coming out to listen to Where There's a Willis, There's a Way. You can follow us at WillisWayPod on Twitter, or email us at williswaypod@gmail.com. You can send us an email if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have concerns, if you have suggestions for the Wheel of Willis, anything else. If you're lonely and you want to talk to somebody, send us an email. You can find all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can follow me, Kendrick, on Twitter at KMartinix. That's KMartinix. Or you can find any other work I've done at kmartinix.com.
And you can find me, Josh, on Twitter at JoshingCarter.
Josh, do you know what we're watching next time?
I do know what we're watching next time. We're going to be watching 1988's small indie film that doesn't have a big cult following or any sort of following, really. It's kind of faded into obscurity. Directed by John McTiernan, John McDouble, Die Hard. And that's the truth. Give or take a lie or two.
Nice.